Today at 8 p.m. Washington time, Trump's deadline expires. Iran hasn't blinked. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed, and the entire world is waiting to find out if the most consequential military decision of 2026 gets made or backed down from. In 39 days of war, Trump has bombed nuclear sites, killed Iran's supreme leader, and shattered its military command. Now he is threatening civilian infrastructure, bridges, power plants. The line between war and war crime is razor thin, and he is standing right on it. Two questions before we go any further. Will he pull the trigger? And if he does, what does Iran do next? Here is what is actually happening right now. Trump issued an ultimatum: reopen the Strait of Hormuz by 8 p.m. Washington time tonight, or face the complete demolition of Iran's power plants and bridges. Iran's military responded by calling the threat, and I am quoting their exact characterization here, delusional. The strait remains closed. The deadline is here. To understand why this deadline matters, you need to understand what the strait closure is actually doing to the world. Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz has disrupted roughly 20% of global oil trade. Energy prices have spiked. Countries across Asia and Europe are implementing emergency austerity measures. The longer it stays closed, the worse the economic damage, and the more political pressure builds on Trump to act. But here is the complication: nobody in the mainstream coverage is addressing directly. Bombing bridges and power plants doesn't open the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's navy and missile batteries are what keep it closed, not its civilian grid. So the question isn't just will Trump bomb the infrastructure. The deeper question is, why would he bomb infrastructure that doesn't solve the problem he says he is trying to solve? There are really only three possible outcomes from tonight. Trump follows through and bombs the infrastructure. Trump extends the deadline, or a diplomatic breakthrough happens in the next few hours. Each one of those outcomes changes this war completely, and we're going to walk through all three with the strategic consequences of each. Stay with me. Let's say Trump pulls the trigger. U.S. and Israeli aircraft begin striking Iran's power grid, bridges, and water infrastructure. What happens in the next 72 hours? First, and this is critical, the strait does not open. Iran's naval command is separate from its civilian infrastructure. Destroying power plants doesn't neutralize missile batteries. The economic pressure Trump wanted to create was already there. Bombing bridges adds destruction, without solving the core problem. Within hours, Iranian cities lose power. Hospitals go to backup generators. Those that have them, water pumping stations fail. Civilian suffering becomes immediate, visible, and internationally broadcast. This is the moment where Trump's legal and diplomatic position deteriorates rapidly. Experts across international law have already stated that deliberately targeting civilian infrastructure is a war crime under the Geneva Conventions. The UN Secretary General has warned this explicitly. Internationally, the strike on civilian infrastructure accelerates condemnation. Europe, already critical, moves toward sanctions discussions. China and Russia push an emergency UN Security Council resolution. Even U.S. allies in the Gulf, who have quietly supported the military campaign against Iran's nuclear program, begin publicly distancing themselves. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar do not want to be associated with a war on civilian populations. Their domestic audiences won't tolerate it. Meanwhile, Iran responds. Iranian advisor Ali Akbar Velayati has already warned that Iran may target the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the choke point between Yemen and the Horn of Africa, through which 10% of global trade flows. If Iran directs the Houthis to close Bab al-Mandeb, in addition to Hormuz, the economic damage to the global economy doubles overnight. Two choke points, 30% of global oil trade. The world economy in genuine crisis. This is the paradox of the infrastructure strike option. It adds humanitarian and legal cost. It accelerates international isolation. It does not open the strait, and it gives Iran justification to escalate further. Trump following through tonight doesn't end the war faster. By most strategic assessments, it deepens it. That is scenario 1. Now let's look at what happens if he blinks. Scenario 2, Trump blinks. He extends the deadline, reframes it as diplomacy, or simply doesn't follow through without formal announcement. Is this possible? Absolutely. Trita Parsi of the Quincy Institute made the point directly. Trump has limited credibility, which paradoxically gives him flexibility. He can extend a deadline without the political cost a more credible leader would face. He has done it before. He may do it again. If Trump extends without a concrete concession from Iran, here is what happens strategically. Iran reads it as confirmation that the threat was a bluff. Future ultimatums lose credibility. The strait stays closed. And the economic pressure that was supposed to force Iran to negotiate actually stabilizes, because markets, seeing no escalation, partially adjust. The leverage Trump was trying to generate dissipates. Not immediately, but measurably. But, and this is important, backing down doesn't mean the war ends. U.S. and Israeli airstrikes on Iranian military targets continue. Iran continues missile retaliation against Gulf states and Israel. The war grinds on. What changes is the specific escalation threshold around civilian infrastructure. Trump backing down tonight means that particular line stays uncrossed. For now, it doesn't mean the broader war de-escalates. Here is the real cost of Scenario 2. Every day the strait stays closed, the global economy absorbs more damage. Every day without a ceasefire, more people die on both sides. And every day that passes without a clear U.S. strategic objective being achieved, the question grows louder in Washington, in allied capitals, and eventually in American living rooms. What exactly is this war for? That question, unanswered, is what historically ends presidencies. Scenario 3 is the one nobody is betting on right now, but it is the one that would be the most consequential. A diplomatic breakthrough before or immediately after the deadline. Here is what we know. Iran has not ruled out negotiation. In fact, Iranian officials have put forward a 10-point proposal calling for a permanent end to the war, including the lifting of sanctions and a ceasefire across all active fronts. That is a negotiating position, not a surrender, but it is engagement. Egypt's officials have told reporters that Iran is open to a 45-day ceasefire, one that guarantees discussion of permanently ending the war, during which Iran would discuss reopening the strait. Qatar's prime minister is making calls to India, Spain, and Norway simultaneously. Pakistan is being used as a communication channel between Washington and Tehran. This is not the absence of diplomacy. It is diplomacy under fire, messy, fragile, and moving fast. For a deal to happen tonight, three things need to align simultaneously. Iran signals a concrete, verifiable step toward reopening the strait, not a promise, an action. Trump accepts that step as sufficient to justify pausing the infrastructure threat. And a mediating country, Oman, Qatar, Egypt, bridges the language gap between what each side can publicly say versus what they've privately agreed. All three conditions are theoretically possible. None are guaranteed. Remember what happened just 9 days before the war started on February 28th. Oman's foreign minister announced a breakthrough. Iran had agreed to never stockpile enriched uranium and to full IEA verification. Peace was described as within reach. 2 days later, the U.S. and Israel attacked anyway. Iran remembers that. Any diplomat trying to broker a deal tonight is working against that memory. Trust is not just low, it is functionally absent. That is the biggest obstacle to Scenario 3, and it is not a small one. To predict what Trump does tonight, you need to understand what he actually wants from this war, because the stated objectives have shifted multiple times. Trump administration officials have offered at least 5 different explanations for starting the war: preventing Iranian retaliation, destroying missile capabilities, preventing a nuclear weapon, seizing Iranian oil resources, and achieving regime change. 5 objectives. Some of them are mutually exclusive. But beneath the shifting rhetoric, there is a consistent theme. Trump wants a win he can show. He wants a visible, declarable victory. Something he can stand in front of a camera and say he achieved. The Strait of Hormuz reopening would be exactly that. A dramatic, tangible, global-scale outcome with an immediate economic impact that every American feels at the gas pump. That is the prize. The infrastructure bombing is the threat designed to produce that prize, not the goal itself. This reframes the entire deadline. Trump doesn't need to bomb the power plants. He needs Iran to blink enough that he can declare a win. If Iran offers even a partial, conditional reopening of the strait, presented through a mediator, Trump has something to work with. He can reframe the deadline extension as strategic patience. His base, focused on the victory narrative, will accept it. The question is whether Iran will give him even that minimum. Iran's position is equally constrained. It cannot reopen the strait without getting something visible in return. A ceasefire commitment, a sanctions concession, a guarantee against further strikes on civilian targets. Its domestic audience watching hospitals go dark and universities get bombed needs to see that the sacrifice produced a result. 2 leaders, both needing a win, both unable to publicly back down without domestic political cost. This is the structural trap that makes tonight genuinely unpredictable. Here is your intelligence briefing for the next 24 hours. 4 signals to watch. These will tell you more than any press conference. First, strait traffic monitoring. if any tanker moves through the Strait of Hormuz tonight or tomorrow morning. That is Iran signaling a partial opening without a formal announcement. Watch the shipping data, not the statements. Second signal, Trump social media. In this war, Trump has communicated major policy shifts via Truth Social before formal briefings. If he posts about Iran between now and midnight, the tone and specific language will tell you whether a deal is forming or whether strikes are being ordered. Watch for the word deal. That means diplomacy is live. Watch for the word demolished. That means the order may already be given. Third signal, Gulf state posture. Saudi Arabia briefly closed the King Aht causeway connecting it to Bahrain earlier today, a significant precautionary move. If Gulf states begin moving civilians away from coastal areas or activating additional air defense systems, they expect Iranian retaliation from a U.S. infrastructure strike. Their behavior is the canary in the coal mine. They have intelligence we don't have public access to. Fourth signal, IAEA and nuclear site access. Iran has denied IAEA inspectors access to damaged nuclear sites since the 2025 war. Any announcement of resumed access, even partial, signals Iran is offering something real in the diplomatic channel. Conversely, any Iranian announcement of accelerated enrichment is a deliberate provocation designed to raise the cost of continued military action. Nuclear signals are the deepest layer of this conflict's logic. When they move, everything else moves with them. So, will Trump actually bomb Iran's civilian infrastructure? The honest answer, as of right now, is that no one outside a very small room in Washington knows for certain. What we do know is this: the strategic case for doing it is weak. The humanitarian and legal cost is severe. The diplomatic window, however narrow, is still open. And Trump's actual goal, a visible win, may be achievable without crossing that line. But here is what this moment reveals about this war's deeper problem. There is no clear end state. The U.S. hasn't defined what victory looks like. Iran hasn't defined what an acceptable peace looks like. And every day that passes without those definitions, the war expands into whatever space the absence of strategy creates. Civilian infrastructure, a second choke point. A Lebanon ground invasion. The war fills the vacuum of missing political vision. What you should do right now is watch the 4 signals we laid out. Strait traffic, Trump's posts, Gulf state posture, IAEA access. Those 4 data points will tell you, in real time, which scenario is unfolding. You don't need to wait for a press conference. The signals are already broadcasting. You now have the framework to read them. The story doesn't end here, it evolves. Tonight is one moment in a war that has already redrawn the Middle East and has weeks, possibly months still ahead of it. Every video on this channel is built to give you the strategic framework to understand what is happening before the headlines catch up. If that is what you are here for, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. The next development in this war is already in motion. You'll want to be here when it breaks.